impressive. I like to, particularly, I'm a big sports guy, so seeing all the different athletes and all.
It was really nice and refreshing to see all the different football players and the different marathon runners, right? Everybody talking about the same kind of things, where it is, no, it's not about meat, it's not about dairy, it's not about any of this stuff, and how plants are like a good and complete fuel for your body and how it's that much more effective. So I don't know, that was really important to me. So
I mean, for me it's inspirational because to watch what the human body can do and see individuals that have achieved kind of the greatest from that perspective, but then also see kind of common people kind of intermingled in the film as well and watching them achieve things. I think it just goes to show that if you put your mind to it and you're willing to try something, even for, 7 days for the firefighter experiments, like, you can achieve great things.
Hello, my Plant Strong pals. Rip here. And you just heard comments from people who attended the one-night theatrical premiere of the Game Changers documentary. And it just so happened that it perfectly corresponded with when we were throwing the Heart of the Hero campaign in Pittsburgh. And so, of course, we naturally included free passes for all of the participants in the 7-day rescue challenge as they were taking their plunge into the Plant Strong lifestyle. Being an executive producer of the Game Changers comes with its perks, one of which is I got to see every iteration of the film before we kind of reached the final version, but nothing takes the cale like being in a packed movie house and watching and listening to people's reactions for the first time. Nothing. James, Wilks, and I were able to spend some time together before and after the private screening of the Game Changers that was thrown by Jon and Tracey Stewart. And I want to share this very special conversation that I had with James, where we discuss the impact of the film and how the Game Changers is doing things that nobody expected. And it is rippling out far and wide beyond just the plant-based vegan community. We talk about the rigors of the science and the quality of the participants that are in the Game Changers, which make it almost impossible to poke holes in. And we talk about his philosophy on the truth in combat and what his guiding principles were that propelled him in his search for the truth about nutrition. All right, I'm here with the man, the myth, the legend, the man of the hour, James Lightnin' Wilks, the star and the producer, and really the concept designer behind the Game Changers. We're here in New Jersey, where we've been invited to do an event around the film by Jon and Tracey Stewart. Quite an honor, and they are just huge fans of the Game Changers. And I mean, I started, James, kind of watching you go down this path, this journey 7 years ago. Can you believe that you're finally where you are right now, where we're showing the Game Changers to an audience of 700 people? It's being hosted by Jon and Tracey Stewart. Did you ever imagine that you would be where you are right now?
No, I mean, it's been a long journey. I think you gave me too much credit to get this far. It took a huge team, obviously, so sure, I was there at the beginning, but, it took a huge team to get it to this level. It took a lot longer than I thought, a lot more money than I thought, but we really thought it would have a big impact. But, the amount of people that have seen it now, it's we're not sure on the exact numbers, but it seems to be growing massively, so it's really exciting.
What happened? So it hit iTunes.
Yep.
And didn't it break some records on iTunes?
Became the number one selling documentary on iTunes, and then when the film came out on Netflix, plant-based eating worldwide, roughly increase in interest on Google, roughly increased by threefold. So it's obviously having a big impact.
And I mean, that must feel. I mean, was that your goal when you set out to make the game changers, to have as big an impact as possible, to try and move the needle as far as the number of people that you could share this knowledge with? What was your goal?
Yeah, I mean, I actually sort of woke up. I was starting to dig into this research, and I woke up at 2 a.m. and thought, I've got to make a documentary about this. I felt like I'd been lied to, and I hate being lied to. So, not my parents weren't trying to lie, but they're just sort of misinformed. So they were telling me as a kid, you've seen in the film, I'm in the Superman outfit, and I'm saying you got to have all this meat and eggs and things to be strong and healthy, and my dad had reinforced that. And then obviously the advertising from the meat industry, and then they sort of fund these studies, and I just felt like I'd been lied to, right? So I felt like I really had to get the word out. And I was hoping that would create a shift towards more plant-based eating for people's health and performance and the planet and everything else. But at the same time, what I really wanted to do is just dispel the myths and let people make their own decision. So I just wanted to point out that we've been lied to, and you really don't need meat or any animal products to be strong and healthy.
Mm-hmm. And as an athlete, you really got to the top of your game as an ultimate fighter, right? As a mixed martial artist.
Yeah.
And that was what, 2009?
2009 is when I won the Ultimate Fighter. I fought for a couple of years after that. But yeah, of course, in the documentary, the story is condensed. You can't tell everything about someone's journey and all the different injuries you get and everything else. But so I won that. Yeah, I got injured, started digging into research for optimal recovery and performance, and that's when I came across the study about the Roman gladiators, as you've seen in the film, and just started digging into it more and more from there. So I bought a used camera off of Craigslist. I'd heard that, I'd started hearing about some of the experts in the plant-based field. Thought, well, this would be an opportunity to go and interview some of them, like yourself and your dad and a few people like that. And so I bought a used camera off of Craigslist and got some advice from the director of photography from The Ultimate Fighter. Went on YouTube, learned how to do the 3-point lighting, got one of the wireless mics, and that's when I came out and interviewed you for the first time.
I think we were in a little hotel room, and I remember thinking, I don't think this guy has any clue what he's getting into. And then I saw you gave a talk, and it was during that talk that I was like, this guy is amazing. He's a perfectionist, and no wonder he was able to become, the Ultimate Fighter champion, because and I asked your wife, because she was there at that event, and I said, how much did James practice this? Because he did an amazing job. And it wasn't just how much you knew the information, it was the way you put together that first presentation. And she said, he didn't sleep, right?
Right.
And so it was at that point that I was like, I like this guy, right? I like your commitment, I like your tenacity.
Well, that's the thing, right? You don't have to have all the skills in the world. So I didn't know how to make a film, but you start putting some effort in, get to as far as you can get by yourself, start researching things, whatever it is, whether it's about nutrition or making a film, start digging into, how to make that, do the best you can, and then bring on the people that have the expertise in those fields, and that's how you really put something together well. Same if you're training for a fight, right? You push yourself, you only get so far yourself. You've got to bring team members on. You've got to bring on a wrestling coach, bring on a boxing coach, bring on a nutrition coach, look at sleep, look at sleep training or living at altitude. Like, you've got to sort of put all these pieces together, and that's what I think we've done with the film, and that's why I think it's been so successful.
Who would you say over the course of the last 7 years is the biggest celebrity/star that you've met while making this?
Well, I'd like to say Rip.
No, come in.
No, so I think Arnold probably, is the biggest.
Yeah.
And of course, like, it's probably the most exciting one, right? Growing up, I remember my dad had his book. So I remember seeing that when I was younger. My brother was into bodybuilding as well.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
And you're watching all his films growing up. So that was pretty cool, getting to interview him and meet him. And he's been super supportive as well. So, and again, like we like to say, it doesn't have to be all or nothing. Obviously, I believe it's better to be 100% eating plants, no animal foods, as many whole plants as possible. But people often message me now, the film's out, does it have to go all in? I do think it's better to go all in, but if your option is stick with what you're currently eating, the standard Western diet, do nothing at all, I think it's better. The more shift you can have to getting more whole plants in your diet, the better.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I would encourage people to eventually try and, be 100%. And for some people, they can jump into it and they get great results right away. For other people, they can work into it more slowly. But just the more whole plants you can get in your diet, the better off you're going to be.
Yeah. What's so what is next? Are you just trying to get your head around you're on Netflix now. You did the world premiere a little over a month ago. You guys got books planned. You got
I mean the main thing right now is putting out resources for people. So on the website, a lot of people are still messaging me on Instagram. I probably get in my personal inbox maybe 100 or so messages a day from people that are eating meat that want to switch, and they want to know, are there any recipes? Is there a meal plan? And then obviously we get thousands on the Game Changers site as well, messages coming in. And we have put some of these resources on the website. So what can I switch for eggs in this recipe, or how to make the transition, our philosophy, some recipes, tips on eating out, that type of thing. So we're going to continue to put in resources, because 5 out of 6 people that go meat free end up going back historically, and and one of the main reason is actually social pressure, but the second largest reason is the lack of resources and knowledge and not knowing what to eat and how to eat and that type of thing. So we want to keep putting resources out, as well as having an online community with a place where people can ask, our scientific advisor questions, or talk to the athletes, or, interact with me. So, and also amongst themselves, just creating a community. Eventually, a book. People are starting to ask, is there a book you could put out? So. Maybe an app, just putting out these resources, Game Changers nutrition certification for trainers, and then one for dietitians. We're also working with the American College of Lifestyle Medicine and also the Defense Health Agency. So the film has been accredited as an ongoing medical education resource. So that's the first time ever for the Defense Health Agency. It's also been endorsed by the Special Operations Medical Association, first film ever. So we're really trying to work in sort of the educational sphere, and give people these resources to both at the personal level to make the switch, but also to doctors and healthcare professionals so they have information to give their patients. Yeah,
that's all amazing stuff. Your website, GameChangersMovie.com, it's brilliant. I mean, the information that you have there for anybody that's curious and wants more information, wants more resources, you guys should be super proud of that. So whenever, I've probably seen the film 20 times. I know you've probably seen it 1,000.
400, at least 400.
Yeah. The scene that gets the most kind of giggles and I think reaction is obviously the one with the 3 college athletes.
Yep.
And where they do the kind of testing the virility of their manhood. Mm-hmm. How in the world did you pull that off? How did you get those volunteers? How did you find Aaron Spitz?
Funnily enough, so I was searching sort of plant-based doctors once I dug into the research, and Dr. Spitz's office literally happened to be 1,000 yards from my house. He just happened to be the lead delegate of urology for the American Medical Association. He wrote the book called The Penis Book. And, he was advocating plant-based eating for better men's health, especially, reducing risk of prostate cancer, but also for erectile function as well. And, I'd seen all of the studies going back about 22 years for looking at blood flow, arterial blood flow, based on having, a heavy animal-based meal versus more of a plant-based meal, and seeing better blood flow there. And started talking with some of the scientific team, like David Goldman, our chief scientific advisor, and then Dr. Michael Greger. And I remember them pointing out, hey, there's something called the penile plasmograph. So the brand is called the Rigiscan, and it basically tests duration, rigidity, and circumference of erections. And we thought, well, that's pretty interesting. Because, as a man, I honestly felt, it wasn't just as an athlete or as a sort of a human being that I felt like I needed protein. As a man, I really felt like, well, something about it that gives you more testosterone, which of course isn't true. There was something about it that I felt like I really had to have meat. And so I thought that would be an interesting experiment, given that the arteries that go to the penis are basically some of the smallest in the body. And so it was really fascinating to see the results. And then, I was surprised that these college athletes were totally cool showing up. A few people did drop out early on, and I remember flying back from New York the day before that filming, and luckily I had Wi-Fi on the plane because, all through the night I was basically trying to figure out a few more athletes to show up because some people dropped out the day before, and it just worked out, really well.
Well, it worked out brilliantly. Yeah. Have you been in touch with those three athletes at all?
Absolutely, about a month ago.
And how are they doing? How have their lives been changed since the movie?
Actually, it must have been just before the film came out. Yeah. So I sent them a link to the film before it came out.
I recently reached out to my friends at Wild Earth to provide me with a few more details about the best diet for dogs. As you guys are well aware, our family is currently feeding our 1.5-year-old rescue Jade Wild Earth plant-based dog food. But the truth is that dogs, they've evolved over millennia to not only enable them to digest plant-based starches, but also to thrive on foods like fruits and vegetables and whole grains and herbs, meats, poultry, fish, and much more, which makes them true omnivores. And I find that fascinating, and I applaud the team at Wild Earth for really redefining what a clean protein means for dogs. I would encourage you to try a bag and save 40% off your first order by visiting wildearth.com or amazon.com and use the code PLANTSTRONG. Let's talk for a sec about some of the myths that you try and bust.
Yep.
In the movie. What would you say is the number one myth you addressed?
That you need meat and animal products for protein. I think that's the number one. I think there's something that's underlying that, which perhaps is a bit more subconscious, that real men eat meat. I think that's an underlying myth. But I think the sort of most conscious myth that people believe, that I feel like we did a good job busting, is that you need meat and animal products for protein. Yeah. And I think it's revelatory for a lot of people. The animals are just the middlemen. So all protein originates in plants. Animals are just the middlemen. You can cut that middleman out and go straight to the source. And a lot of people have sort of been picking up on that and go, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So now they're getting their protein from plants.
Right. What's another myth that you busted in this movie?
Well, I think there were quite a few. I think.
There were lots.
Yeah.
Want me to tee you up a little bit?
Sure. You give me some that you. Busted.
Well, I think one is if I eat soy, right?
Yeah.
That could be problematic,
right?
Because I'm getting these estrogens.
Yeah, exactly.
Is that true?
Right. No, as you know, it's thanks for setting that up. But no, it's not totally not true. So soy contains phytoestrogens, whereas animal products contain the same exact estrogen as humans have in their body, and so it's strange to be worried about a plant estrogen, which actually has beneficial effects, but not be worried about dairy or eggs or meat that is raising your estrogen levels. I mean, after a glass of milk, you're raising your estrogen. I think it was by 27% within hours. I can't remember the exact number.
I think you're right. It's somewhere between 20 and 30%.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, in just an hour.
Right.
Right. And what about what does that do to your testosterone?
It drops. So at the same time, your testosterone is dropping as well.
So your estrogen goes up.
Yeah.
Testosterone goes
drops
down.
Yeah, within hours of drinking cow's milk. So, just much better off getting it from a plant-based milk. So it's just the milk industry has done an amazing job, the dairy industry, at leading us to believe that we need milk. They use that thing called the unique selling proposition or unique selling point in marketing, where they go, okay, what does this product have? It has a lot of calcium. Okay, let's really pitch that.
Yeah.
So, like a cup of collard greens, for example, has more bioavailable calcium, but also has a lot of magnesium, which is also important for bone health. Well, cow's milk is fairly low in magnesium, but they don't advertise that, right? They're just going to hit you with this unique selling proposition over and over and over again. Calcium's cow's milk bones. And of course, as you know, there's an inverse correlation between dairy consumption and bone fractures. So the countries with the highest dairy intake actually have more bone fractures, not less. And so it's counter to what you'd think, and you can get all the calcium you need.
And what's going on there? Why is it because the calcium you're getting from dairy products is not very absorbable, or is it because of the animal protein that's in there?
Well, I think there's a number of hypotheses, and the strongest hypothesis at the moment seems to be the galactose, apparently, which is apparently weakening bones. So the milk sugar in the bone is potentially having some negative effects in the milk, has some negative effects on bone health. It seems to be one of the leading ones that I've heard recently.
Wow.
But I've heard numerous hypotheses over time.
Right. I mean, one of the biggest one I've heard is that you have these sulfuric-containing amino acids that actually siphon calcium out of the bones to buffer that acid load. Yeah. What about, let's talk about iron for a second.
People think they need red meat especially, right, for iron. But they don't realize that heme iron, your body can't really regulate that. So heme iron is the iron that's already attached to the hemoglobin. So when you eat it, your body can't regulate it. With the non-heme iron, which is found in, animal foods have both heme and non-heme, but plants basically there's a minuscule amounts of heme, but basically it's non-heme iron. And your body can regulate that. So if you take in loads and loads of non-heme iron, your body only absorbs what it needs. Right. But if you take in lots of heme iron, your body can't regulate that. And as you saw in the film, 1 milligram per day, or for each milligram, there's a 27% increase in cardiovascular disease. So that's pretty significant.
And how many milligrams are in like
if you take a Wendy's,
burger?
If you take a Wendy's medium burger, not the large, there's like it's between 2 and 3 milligrams of heme iron, and it's for every milligram there's a 27% increase per day.
And most Americans, I would imagine, because they're eating a fair amount of meat, are probably consuming 5 to 8 milligrams of heme iron a day.
Yeah, I don't know what the numbers are, but most people aren't eating just a single Wendy's hamburger, right? So,
one of the things that I think made you one of the best fighters on the planet was your attention to detail and some of these key lessons that you took from Bruce Lee that you've now applied to the movie and the science. What were those lessons?
Well, Bruce Lee's main philosophy was research your own experience, absorb what is useful, reject what is useless, and add what is specifically your own. And so I think for me, I used to study karate and taekwondo and all these different forms, and every martial art has something useful in it. But when I was 15 years old, after I was studying these for quite a few years, I got beaten up on the street and realized that those things really weren't working for me. So it was then I came to the realization, you've got to really dig in and see what the truth in combat is. You've got to start really studying and really looking at, what does the evidence show is the best way to train. Right? And then when I got injured, so I used to be in the search for truth in combat, and when I got injured, I suddenly sort of put myself on this path for the search for truth in nutrition. So there was a parallel. Yeah. And I thought, again, okay, what have I got to do? I'd fallen for the sort of nutritional evidence that was in magazines and blogs, and I sort of likened that to sort of just falling for the karate, lessons that I'd sort of gone to, because it looked flashy and it looked good. And
didn't you call that bro science?
Yeah. So I'd fallen for the bro science, exactly. And so I thought, okay, what have I got to do? I've got to really look at the evidence. So that's when I did a deep dive. First of all, that's when I came across the study about the Roman gladiators, and that wasn't enough to convince me. People have been saying, oh, this whole film is built around this premise that gladiators were vegan. Right? Well, first of all, that's not what the film said. The scientists in the film that analyzed the bones said that they were predominantly vegetarian. Right. And then I said I was shocked that they could do this eating mainly plants. So no one ever said they were vegan, and that isn't what the film is based on. All that did was a starting point that sort of got me into how could they have been strong and athletic, in which they do know from the attachments on the bones. They know that they were strong. And, that just made me start looking into the nutritional research. But again, I applied that same mindset from the search for truth in combat to the search for truth in nutrition, and just started really digging in. And I do have a science degree, so I was sort of a little bit familiar with reading scientific papers, and so just started really digging into the truth, and then also looking into how those studies that I read were funded. Looking at, was there any conflict of interest listed, and if not, because a lot of times they're supposed to list the conflict of interest, but a lot of times they don't. So you start digging into each of the authors, and it's quite a timely process to start digging into this. But that's what I felt I had to do to get to the bottom of this.
And the science that's in this movie is, from what I can tell, everything is footnoted.
Yeah.
It is about as rock solid as you can get, and you don't just use anybody. This is the level of pedigree of the physicians, of the archaeologists, you name it. Can you talk a little bit about the pedigree of some of the people that are in the movie?
Yeah, so some of the documentaries that come out in the past, it's sort of a lot of, people would say vegan doctors, which is not necessarily the case. And certainly in this case wasn't. Some of the anthropologists, some of the scientific experts weren't completely vegan.
Right.
They were probably eating mainly plants because it's healthier. But just like doctors, you could be a doctor and know that smoking is bad for you. Doesn't mean you're not going to smoke yourself. You can still know the evidence. So there's been some criticism of the film saying, well, all of the doctors in it are just vegan doctors, so they've got an agenda. Well, that's not true. Right. So if you look at, the level of expertise in the film, so we had at the time, the chair of nutrition at Harvard, Dr. Walter Willett, who's the most published, or was at the time the most published nutritional scientist in the world.
And I'm going to stop you after you
Sure.
say each person
Sure.
just a little bit. So Walter Willett, so one of the things that he said that really sticks out in my mind is that animal protein revs up tumor and cancer cells. Is that what you heard?
Yeah, exactly. So, and what was really interesting is that he said with dairy consumption and prostate cancer, which is obviously going to affect men, obviously, there was the causal link was actually quite clear, right? So that's a pretty big statement for someone at his level to say that it was a causal link, not just a correlational link where we see dairy go up and so prostate cancer could have been something else that wasn't connected. But he's saying there's a causal link, so it's really quite interesting. Someone of that level is saying that says a lot.
Yeah, and then how about Kim Williams?
Yeah, president of the American College of Cardiology at the time when we interviewed him. Again, it's hard to put down people of these credentials at this level. He talked about the various inflammatory mediators, and of course in the film we couldn't fit in. Some of the experts were talking for 2 hours. Yeah. Some of them even 4-hour interviews. And it was a shame because I'm sitting there thinking, oh yeah, we've got to put this in the film, And they're just hours and hours of interviews, and it's hard to fit in everything you want. So people are trying to pick apart little bits of science in the film, making pretty false claims about it. But the science in the film is like less than 1% of what we uncovered in the research. So
right, and then you had Columbia Batiste.
Yeah.
You had Dean Ornish.
Yep. Who's done amazing work with looking at reversing not only heart disease but prostate cancer, and has now moved on to
Alzheimer's.
Reversing early stage, preventing, but also reversing early stage Alzheimer's, and the studies apparently are going really well. So it'll be interesting to see if there is an effect there.
Phenomenal. And then who are some of the experts that you spoke to, for example, about the canine teeth and stuff
the most prominent anthropologist that we spoke to was Dr. Richard Wrangham, who's the chair of anthropology at Harvard. And there were some really great things that he said that we didn't get to put in the film. He said basically if you were left, back in the day, our ancestors to eat only meat or only plants, the people who eat only meat would be dead pretty quickly, and the ones eating only plants would thrive. So I think that soundbite didn't make the film. It was in an early cut that we sort of played around with, but for someone of that level to say that, that says something.
And the executive producers that are associated with the film are, these are world-class athletes. Who are some of the executive producers?
So Chris Paul, who's the 9-time All-Star NBA player, Lewis Hamilton, who's now the 6-time Formula One champion, and Novak Djokovic, the #1 male rated tennis player in the world, who just won Wimbledon recently in the final. I think it was one of the longest, or the longest that had ever gone on.
Beat Roger Federer. It was. I watched the whole thing.
Yeah, it was a great match and great endurance. And again, as you know, the endurance is one of the big things that you get.
But in order to be an executive producer, did you also have to be like 100% plant-based?
No, I mean, they're not all. So Arnold's not 100% plant-based. So he's never really been into dairy. He's always said, milk is for babies. So he's never been a fan of dairy. And then, since sort of learning he'd come to his own conclusions as well, way before this film, realizing that plants were the way to go and that animal products could be harmful to your health. And so he's cut down on his meat consumption by 80%. So he might, he still likes a steak in it once in a while. But you can eat something because you like the taste of it if that's what you want to do, but don't trick yourself into thinking that that's good for you. And then, Jackie Chan, I don't think he's 100% plant-based, but he's largely plant-based. And so, these people believe in the film, and Arnold wanted to help get out that it's a myth that you need meat to be strong and healthy. And perhaps he sort of, perpetuated that a little bit back in the day. I've even heard stories of him waking up at like 3-4 in the morning to eat a whole chicken back in the day, and so he probably feels that he probably helped perpetuate that back in the day and wants to set the record straight.
Well, he even talked. I think it was in the movie, maybe not, or maybe it was one of the scenes that were cut, about one of the people that he looked up to when he was in bodybuilding was Bill Pearl,
right?
Who was all vegetarian, never did meat.
Yeah, I think it was because of gout. So some of those bodybuilders were getting gout back in the day, and so quite a few of them switched over.
Yeah.
There's others like Andreas Carling, and there was a whole list of bodybuilders that back in the day that went meat free largely because of gout and started winning championships. I'm trying to remember the other names, but
So anybody with gout out there that's listening, you definitely want to drop the meat. One of the scenes that when I was watching this, it got me more pumped up than anything else was when Nate Diaz took down Conor McGregor.
Yeah.
Oh gosh. I mean, did you just love that or what?
Yeah, it was a great scene. I think, Conor McGregor was being so cocky before that, saying you're like a gazelle, I'm like a lion, because that was clearly making fun of his plant-based diet, right? Pointing out that I'm like a lion, like a carnivore, and he was eating 2 steaks a day. And, people are trying to criticize that part and say, well, there was another fight after that where Conor just, slightly edged him out, although people thought it was a bad decision. But we could have gone into that whole story, and we thought about it because Conor did cut down on his meat consumption after that,
right.
And so, I think it was in Conor's words that he was having 2 steaks a day, and it affected his energy, and it was a battle of energy, and as we know, maybe people do or don't know, but Nick and Nate Diaz, the 2 brothers, are just known for phenomenal endurance, and they're both high-level triathletes as well. So again, we know that you're going to have better endurance, eating.
That's so interesting because I had no idea that Nate and Nick Diaz were also triathletes.
Yeah.
Do you know?
They've sometimes literally had a fight one night, next morning they're up at 5 a.m. and they're running a triathlon in the same city.
I just can't imagine how tough these guys are.
Yeah.
It's phenomenal. And hasn't Nate now, you said, we were talking earlier, and you said he's gone on now and he's become like a...
He's a big deal right now. They actually created a new belt in the UFC called BMF.
What's that mean?
Well,
BMF.
Baddest.
Bad mother.
Yeah, bad mother effer.
Bad mother father.
Yeah, bad mother effer is basically what that stands for. They created a new belt just for this fight that he had last week, and unfortunately it got stopped by the referee. Nate was cut, and it would have been interesting to see the 4th and 5th round because that's when his endurance, really, helps. So.
Wow, and so one of the things you didn't show in the film that I thought was interesting is how many rounds did that first fight go where he beat Conor McGregor? Because you were saying that.
Yeah, I can't remember actually.
But I think you said that maybe the first 3, maybe Conor was taking it. And then after that.
Yeah, I can't remember what round it was.
Yeah.
But Nate's just known for his endurance. So.
Yeah. Anyway, I loved that scene.
Great,
and then, of course, when he talks to the mic, I'm
not surprised.
Are you surprised? No, I'm not surprised, mother, father. One of the conversations that you and I have had numerous times, you, me, and Joseph Pace, one of the other producers and one of the writers of the Game Changers, is about the Backfire Principle.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's something that we were, we sort of felt naturally, but we also saw it in the research as we were going along, is that basically if you just give people information and if it's against their sort of current beliefs, then they dig in their heels more and believe in their original position more than the facts that you're showing them. Yeah. And so it's just, sort of just worked out that we were showing these great role models, and the psychology, the literature in psychology also shows that showcasing these role models is an effective way to open people's minds up and let them be more accepting of the science.
Mm-hmm. I know when I was a firefighter, some of these guys, they didn't care about how much cholesterol was in a burger. They didn't care about saturated fat. In fact, because their identities were so tied to eating meat, they would actually, in front of me, shovel down, 2 or 3 burgers instead of their normal one, just to show me how tough they were, how manly they were.
I remember my dad, before he had the heart attack, because I was already digging into this, and I remember him taking a big swab of butter and just spreading it on his toast, And I said, that's not really great for you. He said, oh yeah, and he got like double, and put it on the toast. And I think people are trying to show, there's actually some sort of there's some science behind that. People are trying to basically show that what impacts other people, like their genes are stronger than those people, so what impacts them is not going to impact other people. So
yeah. Look what your father, who reacted that way, look how far he's come.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately for him, he had to have a heart attack in order to wake up and start listening, right? So my hope is, and this has happened with lots of people already reaching out to me, there's been a lot of sad stories where people have said, my dad ate tons of meat and cheese and unfortunately passed away at like 60 years old of a heart attack. So it's really sad to hear those stories. But then there's also some great stories I hear about, my dad or my mum or my auntie or my uncle has been having heart issues, and now they've switched and they're starting to feel better and they're down on their medication. And so, it's never too late to make the change. People think, I'm already 60, I'm already 70 or whatever. You can still make that shift. And so, I'm really pleased that my dad made the shift, because for a lot of people, the first sign of a heart attack would be death. Yeah. And so I'm pleased that he made the shift. Obviously, it'd be nice if he'd made it earlier, but I'm hoping that will inspire, and it seems to be, inspire other people to make the change before it's too late.
Well, I think that the Game Changers literally is one of the most inspirational, informational, exciting documentaries that's come out in my lifetime. As I've told you probably 20 times, I couldn't be more proud of what you and Joseph and the whole team has been able to create. It's monumental, and I think as Louis said after one of the premieres, there'll be the world we know it before Game Changers and after Game Changers. And that's pretty powerful.
Yeah, I mean, I think, thanks for saying that. And I think it is happening. Like I said, there's like a threefold interest in plant-based eating worldwide, because since the film came out. If you look at Google Trends and look at the spike in interest, so there's definitely a conversation that's happening on both sides of the aisle. You've got the keto and the carnivore folks trying to weigh in, but the fact that they're trying to rebut the film so hard and come out against it, I mean, it's better to be talked about than the one doing all the, getting on. It's hard not to jump on social sometimes and try and rebut their claims, but there's a big conversation happening, and I think that's always a great thing.
All the pioneers have lots of arrows in their backs, so you're tough.
Yeah.
You'll
better watch my back.
All right, James. Thank you so much. Peace. Engine 2. Keep it plant strong.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Rhett.
Oh, yeah. The Game Changers came out, and it has done things that nobody expected. In 1 week, it surpassed and became the most downloaded documentary on iTunes in the history of iTunes. It is consistently one of the most popular and trending movies on Netflix. And as I'm sure you can imagine, when this happens, you're going to receive a lot of backlash. And recently, Joe Rogan did an episode where he had one of his so-called nutrition experts, a guy named Chris Kresser, come in and basically shoot holes in the film. And he then invited James Wilks to come on the show and defend himself. And James goes toe-to-toe against Joe and Chris, two animal-eating lovers, and basically rules the octagon. He takes them down, and in my opinion, he takes them down hard. This is almost 4 hours long, and there's been over 2.3 million downloads on YouTube alone. So pretty spectacular. I want to read to you something that Joe Rogan wrote in his show notes, which is, "At Lightning Wilks, one of the producers of The Game Changers, came on to challenge some of the criticism that Chris Kresser presented about the movie. And to say that he did well would be a tremendous understatement. James knocked it out of the park and defended himself and the film quite spectacularly. So much so that I'm actually considering taking the original breakdown of the film offline." Pretty fantastic. I want you to know that if you're interested in watching or listening to this episode, we'll link to it in our show notes. James Wilks is nothing short of an all-around good guy. If you want to hang out with James this summer at Camp Plantstock, come. He'll put you in the sleeper headlock. If you tap out, he won't knock you out completely. But I invite you to come join James, the producer and star of The Game Changers, along with Dr. Michael Clapper, Dr. Michael Greger, Marco Borges, the trainer of Beyonce and Jay-Z, Gene Bauer, Jim Hicks, my whole family, Dr. Monica Agrawal, Brenda Davis, Dr. Neil Barnard, and a slew of others as we romp in the Black Mountains of Asheville, North Carolina. It's the ultimate blend of deep learning, epic stories, new ideas, plus all kinds of strategies and tools for accelerating your plant strong living. Visit campplantstock.com and register today. All right. I hope you enjoyed that conversation with James. He truly has not only the heart of the hero, but he has a special fire that burns deep inside of him, and I so appreciate his passion. Thanks so much for listening. I want you to know that this interview was also filmed, so you're welcome to check that out on YouTube as well. Links to the video version, plus additional show notes, and links to our special offers can be found at plantstrongpodcast.com, or within your podcast player. You simply have to scroll down within the episode. I want you to be sure to tune in next week when we're going to share the highlights from the live panel discussion that James and I took part in that was moderated by the one and only Jon Stewart. And finally, I want to encourage you to support our family's 501c3 public charity, the Esselstyn Foundation. We partner with existing nonprofits to make sure that the transformational power of the whole food, plant-strong lifestyle is available to everyone, no matter what your background or financial situation. All of our programming is offered free of cost. If you want to find out more, go to esselstynfamilyfoundation.org and know that all donations are tax deductible. Thanks. Thank you for listening and subscribing to our show. I want you to know that we read each and every one of your reviews, and we appreciate each and every one. If you want to learn more about this season or today's guests and sponsors, please visit plantstrongpodcast.com. The Plant Strong podcast team includes Scott Badasil, Lori Kordowich, Amy Mackey, Patrick Gavin, Wade Clark, and Carrie Barrett. I want to thank my parents, Dr. Caldwell D. Esselstyn Jr. and Ann Kryle Esselstyn, for creating a legacy that will be carried on for generations and being willing to go against the current and trudge upstream to the causation. We are all better for it.